Hoefgen from, sorry, Ann, you're okay with that, right? Recording it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Ann Hoefgen from the Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota. And you also have, and I apologize, I forget her name, Joy, with you, who is going to do a presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you. If you guys have chat questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can wait to the end and we can unmute and you can just ask them that way too. So thanks, Ann.
Yeah, thanks everybody for having us here today. Not that you got to vote on this or anything, but I am hopeful we can give you some information that will be helpful to better understand what we do at Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota. I'm going to share my screen here, hopefully. I don't know why it gives me two choices. Are you guys seeing my screen? Okay, great. And I don't see Joy, but I know she's here somewhere and she will pop in when it is her turn. So Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota, where I have been for 18 years, and we are happy to partner with Title III and with Land of Dancing Sky to provide services to seniors, primarily low income seniors, but not exclusively. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Feel free and please, please, please interrupt as we're going. Right now, I can only see like 4 people on my screen, so I can't see everybody else. I don't know why I can't see the chat either. Hold on. So just interrupt. And Judy, maybe if you can help me with the
I'll watch the chat for you, Ann.
There we go. I got a grid, but I still can't see everybody all at the same time. So
yep.
And Joy is with me here somewhere, I think, and she is a staff attorney, as she introduced herself earlier, and we'll get to her. Oops, hold on here. There we go. So we are a standalone nonprofit organization. I don't have a quiz, but we are that. We are what is commonly referred to as civil legal aid. So that means we provide non-criminal legal help. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the misconceptions oftentimes is that we are either a state agency or like the public defenders, that we are required that if you have a non-criminal issue and you're going into court, you can't afford a lawyer, everybody gets a lawyer. That is not the case. And we'll talk about our turnaway rate and some of the challenges we have in a minute, but we are free legal help in civil, which is non-criminal cases. The legal system is divided into the criminal side and the civil side. And the criminal side is kind of the obvious stuff, right? The police are involved, law enforcement is involved, prosecution involved, and the court part of civil is, and we'll talk about a little more, is the other half of it. But there's a lot of cases that we do that don't really have a district court action involved. There's administrative hearings, sometimes just writing a demand letter, sometimes picking up the phone and using the law to enforce people's rights. So we, like many of you, are funded by a variety of sources. We do offer our services free to those who qualify. And to cases that are within our service priorities. All right. So moving on, I'm probably going too fast. I'm looking at my screen here. So we have a large service area. We are the same service area as Land of Dancing Sky plus one additional county. So in the service areas, those 22 counties in Northwest Minnesota, it's about 24,000 square miles. It is a large service area that is challenging for us to cover, and we're going to talk about some of the innovative ways we're trying to cover all that service area in a minute here. We have about 65,000 potential clients on any given day. Obviously, we can't do that all ourselves, and we'll talk about our partners as well. We do have 3 staffed offices. This is a picture that represents the whole state, and we're that green on the upper left-hand side. We do have staffed offices in Moorhead, Alexandria, and Bemidji, but we serve all 22 counties, and we try and serve them through a variety of ways. In 2021, we closed over 2,800 cases, impacting over 7,000 people in Northwest Minnesota. We also, one of the things we track is preserving income, especially for our low income folks. And we preserved or obtained over $500,000 in benefits. And that is things like child support, property settlements, stopping the denial of benefits, anything along that line. So a minute ago, I did mention that we have, over 65,000 potential clients, and that's just in counting of our low-income clients in Northwest Minnesota. Due to lack of resources, we have to turn away an awful lot of them. For every 432 middle income or upper income folks, there is an attorney available. And for every low income person, there is one legal aid attorney for over close to 6,000 clients. So we know we can't fully serve them all. So we turn away about 55% that we're not able to fully serve. Now, that being said, in a minute, I'm going to have Joy talk about our application process. Now we do the best that we can to serve as many people as we can. The other thing I would say about this slide is this slide reflects statewide numbers. And many of you, all of you, I think, I lost track of where everybody lives in rural areas, know that there's a real lack of resources in rural areas, and lawyers are one of those resources. Not just civil legal aid lawyers, but private attorneys who would represent paying clients. There are what we are calling legal deserts, and small towns, we're seeing it anecdotally, and there's a lot of research on it, is towns that used to have, or counties even really, that would have lawyers to help people write a will or deal with a guardianship issue or a family law issue or criminal, any issue that you would need a lawyer for. And no one really likes lawyers till they need one themselves. I know the jokes. They're just not there. There is what's called legal deserts out there. There are entire counties where there's one, maybe two, three, five at the most licensed attorneys. And oftentimes those people with licenses are the judge, the law clerk, the prosecutor, maybe a public defender. And those folks are not able to represent someone in a civil proceeding. So we know that for everyone, accessing the power really of sometimes the power of a lawyer is not that easy and not that easy to do. So I think that even these stats that we're talking about are even more problematic in the rural counties. I oftentimes do some I've looked at in the past, say how many lawyers do we have and how many stoplights do we have? And there's counties that have one of each. So I'm going to pass it on to Joy to talk about our a little bit about our process about when somebody does apply. We'll talk later about how you apply, but if somebody does apply, how we try and ensure that they get as much service as possible.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to talk about the process of how a potential client could reach us. We would have a client call our intake line. We do have a 1-800 number, which is 1-800-450-8585. Clients are also able to apply online and do an online application where an intake person would call them back. The one special thing about seniors is that there is not an income guideline for a senior. If it was a normal client who was calling in, they would have to be beyond a certain point of the poverty line. But if they are a senior, 60 years or older, they will be allowed to speak to an attorney regardless of their income. And when I say that they're allowed to talk to an attorney regardless of their income, the one unique thing about our program is that we do have an attorney of the day program, which means that if the client calls intake between the hours of 9 to 5 on Monday through Wednesday, there's going to be an attorney that they can talk to, and then it's 9 to 4 on Thursdays and Fridays. And that will be immediately that they can talk to an attorney after they complete their intake. If the senior is over income, they will only be given a brief advice, but they will still be allowed to talk to an attorney. Our focus is on taking cases that are critical need. Unfortunately, because of funding, we can't provide full representation for every person who calls our intake line. But if they are a senior, again, they will be allowed to talk to an attorney. One thing that we also have to be mindful of is third-party contact. If you have a client who has a disability or a barrier for them calling our office, feel free as their provider to call into intake with them. They can give oral consent for us to speak with you when you're on the line, and that can sometimes be helpful for a client to be able to reach our office and make that intake. But we also have to be mindful about who our client actually is. For example, if I had an adult child who calls in and says, Mom really needs to get a power of attorney because I need to be able to help Mom more, I need to remember that the client is actually Mom. It's not going to be the adult child. So I would need to talk to Mom and say, hey, what are you comfortable with? What do you want? And that's who my client is. It's not the adult child who calls in. It's going to be the actual parent. And I need to make sure that those are the services that they want.
Hey, Joy, I'm just going to interrupt. I know it's harder on Zoom. I can't wave at you. I'm just going to reiterate that point a lot because that does happen a fair amount. And we've had circumstance, and one thing that we're always careful of or want to be sure we're doing is providing services to the client that client wants. So it's pre-COVID, but we've had situations where just the situation that Joy brought up is that someone brought their parent to our office and said, here's what I need to have a power of attorney over mom. And wanted to come into every meeting. And there were some real red flags about wanting to be in control. And so we have to know who our client is, and our client has to want those services. And even if someone isn't functioning maybe cognitively at 100%, we have an obligation, and there's even ethical rules about dealing with clients with diminished capacity is the word they use in the ethical rule. And so this comes up a fair amount with seniors where somebody thinks they know what's best for mom, and whether they think they know what's best and it really is best, or there's some concern about financial exploitation. That's something that we're just really careful about. But I will say, we also understand that sometimes calling with someone is helpful, because it's and having that support and maybe listening to the information. So that's just something just for you guys to know, that if you're working with a client and want them to apply for services, we're going to be careful about confidentiality, but with permission, probably talk to that person alone a little bit to see if they understand what's going on. We'll move forward. So, all right, sorry, Joy, I'm just hammering.
No worries. Thank you, Ann. And the other thing too, when clients are calling in to do an intake, is that I want people to know that we're open to is, as a provider, you can call if you have an issue and run it by me and say, hey, Joy, is this something that you could help with? And I've encountered that before with the Ombudsman for long-term care, and always feel free to reach out and run an issue by me and say, hey, is this something that your office could help with? Because that's what we're here for. So the different kind of cases that we do take, as you can see on the PowerPoint, is that we do have different areas, and they kind of break into 3 different, and that's family, housing, and economic stability. The big thing is that we can only provide, there's so many phone calls that we get that often the full representation are just the critical base needs, and providing services to those kind of cases. In family law, I think one area that we can kind of think of with seniors is domestic violence, and that can often be order for protection or harassment restraining orders. We're not usually drafting the HROs or the order for protections. Those are community partners help clients with that, or they can get the initial forms on the Get Forms on the Minnesota Judicial website. We become involved after those are filled out and once a hearing has been set, but clients can call asking questions about those. Whether or not we can provide full rep will depend on those circumstances. Another area of family law that often affects seniors is grandparent rights, third-party custodians. For example, if you have a client who is providing care for a grandchild because a mom or dad has left the child in his care and wants to legally establish rights to that child as a third-party custodian, that's something our office can guide that client in figuring out how to do that. In housing, I have seen where seniors call because they're still in their own apartments. They've been given notice that they're going to get non-renewals of their leases or termination of these leases, and they want to know what to do. Often when they call into the intake line, we're able to help them figure out whether or not that notice is good and give them advice of what to do next, and help them determine whether they'll have a possible defense or what would be their best foot going forward. If they're having housing assistance, I think it's also important that they call and talk to us when they find themselves in this situation, so that they know what the ramifications for their housing could be if they did housing assistance, if they did lose that housing. And if we get to a point where a client decides to stay in that housing after they are given their non-renewal or termination and an eviction notice has been filed, we can kind of like what Ann talked about earlier, how we're not always in the courtroom. That's a situation where we can sometimes reach out to a landlord and try to come up with a resolution that maybe gets rid of the eviction and gives them more time to get out and possibly get that eviction expunged off their record, because it does have those consequences in the future for housing. And then finally, when we're looking at economic stability, this involves MA, Social Security. It can involve, sometimes clients call about they get a summons on a judgment about how to respond to that, or even helping a senior get an expungement so they are able to get better housing, or if they are still working at age 60 to get an expungement of a criminal record to help them in the future get jobs. At this point, I would like to talk about the specific senior cases that we do help clients with, and that would be the When we're looking at access to healthcare, one thing that we can think about too is food benefits. For example, if a senior is getting a SNAP benefit, but is also working a little bit, I've had a senior call before where they get something in the mail saying, I'm losing my benefits, and they think they're also losing their Social Security retirement benefits. But really what it is they just haven't documented completely the hours that they're working that they need to for the county. So in helping them figure that out and make that connection with their county work and get it straightened out is something that we can do. Or when you're looking at health benefits, if there's an insurance company reaches out to a senior and says, we're not going to pay for this medically necessary procedure, that's something that we could help with and see if there's anything that we could legally do to help them get that service that they need. And that could involve even helping represent them at the administrative hearing.
I'm going to interrupt again just because I have such a good story on that particular issue. And I think it's two things. Number one, I think sometimes I'll just give you guys a story to help sort of put it into context of the stuff we're talking about. But number two, it's an example where there was no district court action, right? They didn't get a summons, they didn't get a complaint, but it was a senior who was denied from her insurance company, denied pre-authorization for a back surgery. And this is someone who was living in her own home, doing really well, gardening, active, and her back got worse and worse and worse, progressively worse. And she tried all the things. She did what her doctor said. She tried the physical therapy. She had tried some other treatments. And this surgery is what her doctor thought she needed. She went for pre-authorization and the insurance company denied it. And she was terrified. And luckily she got to our office and we took a look at it and we're like, well, this is an unlawful denial. It's incorrect. And an attorney gathered the evidence, gathered the documents from the doctor, and went to what was called administrative. There was a procedure through her health insurance, which I wouldn't have even known that this was a thing, right? To appeal that decision. So many of our decisions in administrative law, whether it do with county benefits or insurance, are administrative law, and you have a right to appeal most of them. Most people, I think, don't think about that and don't think about an attorney in those situations. But she did, and our attorney was able to go to a hearing and elicit the testimony necessary to get that decision overturned by that neutral third party. Right. So there was a judge, but it, not with a robe or whatever, but a judge overturned that decision. She got the surgery and she was had some recovery time, of course. It was a back surgery, but back in her home, gardening again a few months later. And you just think about the impact that has on one person's life. Trying to keep people safely in their homes is a lot of the work that we do for seniors. And I know that a lot of the work that you guys do too, but thinking about, is there a legal barrier to this person remaining in their home? Were they denied a benefit they should have gotten from the county? Were they denied a health benefit? Things like that. So when we talk about critical basic needs, I just think being at home safe is one of those critical basic needs, just like Joy talked about. Domestic violence safety and stability and income stability, those are, in housing, are all basic needs. So that's my little interruption here. Go ahead, Joy. Sorry.
No worries. When we're looking at nursing homes, I think it's important to realize that on August 1st, 2021, there was a new law that came into effect about the termination of assisted care. And I think that's caused some issues when clients are getting termination notices about whether or not all the requirements have been met. And I think that we're a good partner to partner with to call if there are any questions about that. Sometimes we can help all the way to filing the appeal for the administrative hearing. But I think sometimes when we're looking at whether the notice has been good or not, the one thing that we can do that's not going to court is to kind of talk to the facility and talk to the client, and what is everyone's goal? If the goal is to have client removed, I think this is where it's having an attorney involved, is we can talk about how do we get that accomplished? Where does client want to go? How much extra time does client need to get there? So there's good things that we can do with that too, but that is an area where you can call if a client does receive that notice for the nursing home or the assisted care to make sure that it was done properly. We're talking about nursing homes too. I think there's other issues that arise at nursing homes where our agency can help. I did receive a call once where a husband had been placed at a nursing home and had an adult daughter who was his power of attorney. And the adult daughter, as his power of attorney, had said that his wife of 20 years wasn't allowed to visit him at the nursing home. And I was able to get involved in that situation and reach out to the ombudsman, and she was able to talk to the husband and allow the wife to have access again to the husband. So there's weird situations like that can also arise in a nursing home where we can help. For advanced planning, I'm sure people have been aware of power of attorneys. We're able to help clients draft those documents if you want. And just talking to clients about what they're trying to get accomplished with and what kind of rights and powers they're letting their attorney in fact have. I think that it's important for clients to also realize that when they're choosing an attorney in fact, they need to make sure it's somebody that they can trust and be aware of what kind of rights that they want to give the person who's going to be their attorney in fact to have. For example, if they have all the financial rights and the child is using mom and dad's mom's checking account, they could be making purchases that they're not allowed to do, and mom doesn't know because his attorney in fact has been given all this power. So I think it's really important that seniors are aware of when they are drafting documents such as a power of attorney, that they're using somebody who they trust. Same with healthcare directives. We're able to help with the drafting of it and just talking about what kind of medical interventions they want and how important it is to let family and friends know where the document is. These are helpful for seniors. I think when a parent gets sick, to have this done before the parent gets sick, so there's not children who are possibly fighting when mom and dad or mom's sick at the hospital about this is what mom would want done or not want done. Everybody knows what mom would want done if she had already drafted the healthcare directive. And then finally, wills. I've heard clients say, I don't need a will because my wife or husband will get everything if I die. My kids are already grown. I think it's also to be mindful that if you don't have a will and you have property that's under $75,000, you lose the right to have a personal representative collect that property with the will document. So that is a really good, helpful tool for seniors to have, because it does make the collection of property a little bit easier once a loved one has died. Home ownership issues. Another way that we can help is I've seen a situation where a couple have lived together for many years and they're not married. They buy a house together in their 50s, but only one person is on the deed to the house, and that person dies. And you have an adult child who's not too happy that dad's girlfriend's living in the house and tells that person to leave, and talking to the elderly about what is their goal with this home and whether they really want the significant other to leave upon their death when they're not married is important homeowner issues that we can talk to about with elderlies. And then Social Security issues for people under 60. We do help with Social Security cases, but when they are over 60 and not yet quite at retirement, that is something that we can help all the way to appeals. Or if there's concerns about working and whether that will cause any issues with their benefits. And then reasonable accommodations comes up. The situation is for working, if they're still working, or with housing. Again, if there's an issue that's affecting a senior, feel free to refer to our office or give me a call and see if that's something that we could help with. But these are some of the issues that we see with senior specific cases.
Thanks, Joy. Feel free, you guys, if questions are rising, we may get to it or not. Just feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, we'll just keep going. What I'm hoping that last slide did, and some of Joy's examples, is to have everybody think about situations of clients or consumers, whoever you're working with, they may have that wait a minute, there might be an issue here where we can resolve this in a different way. We might not be stuck. So trying to give you lots of examples about that. So as far as how we deliver those services that we're talking about, and in those case types, we do a number of things. On the far left-hand side of the slide, you'll see kind of the traditional, what lawyers do, right? We go into court, or more often than not, we Zoom into court now. And we'll talk more about the digital divide and Zoom courts in a minute. We Zoom into court, or we show up in court in a variety of ways to represent people, but also administrative proceedings. That's like the highest level of service, really, that what an attorney can do. Because of limited resources and just overwhelming numbers, we do a fair amount of services in that middle section, which is giving someone just information about what their rights are. And sometimes that's keeping people out of court and saying, it's probably better if you don't do anything and just maybe let sleeping dogs lie, and keeping cases without merit out of court, or telling people we don't think you have a great case. Sometimes in between there too is what's your legal right, and here's some brief services. I'll help you write a letter to your landlord, or maybe I'll pick up the phone and call the landlord even before court documents are filed to negotiate something and try and be an advocate, but also a liaison between parties. I think Joy brought that up too. I feel like in the last 2 years, we've had, I think, 3 to 5 situations with long-term second marriages and adult children, and then the one of the parents becoming ill, and those family conflicts really rise to the surface when someone starts going through dementia or passes away. All of that longstanding, I think, those family issues turn into legal issues sometimes. So we can do some help with forms and some assistance in that area. And then the third thing that we do a fair amount of is community education. We have some websites that we can, the Law Help in particular, I should have probably highlighted here. This lawhelpmn.org is really fantastic and has lots of resources, fact sheets. It has powers of attorney and healthcare directive interactive forms. We put in information and it makes the document for you, which is really nice. And that's the one I'd really want to highlight, that lawhelpmn.org, because what we don't want people doing, and I know I do it too, it's just like when you have a symptom and you Google it and then you tell your doctor, well, I think I have this certain disease because I Googled it. People do that with legal information a lot. There's a lot of Googling of legal information and being told, well, I read on the internet that this is what has to happen or what can't happen. And every state has different laws. And just because your sister's situation was one way doesn't mean yours will be. So being able to have this Law Help MN as a really reliable source is something we're really happy to do. And it's a statewide. In addition, I'll just throw out that a lot of these services, we have staff attorneys. We are a law firm, a nonprofit law firm. Sometimes we work with our private attorney partners. If there's an area, a particularly complex real estate issue, we would contract with an attorney who has that area of expertise, because we can't know everything all the time. So the other thing we do is we put together some self-help clinics. So sometimes people will say, go to the clinic, sit down with a person, and they'll help you with the forms. I want to talk briefly about kind of an innovative project that's going on statewide, and hopefully a way that it can serve seniors. The Pew Research Center did some research about access to internet, access to the technology that we're all using, the technology we're using right now and more. And what they found in particular for low income clients, for people earning under $30,000 a year, 43% of them had no home broadband. 43%, almost half. 41% had no laptop or desktop. Okay, well, a lot of us, they were not working from home. These are frontline workers, things like that. 24% didn't have a smartphone. And I think people think everybody has a smartphone now. 24% didn't. Now, I don't know if those stats for seniors, but I think, as you know, those stats are going to hold true for seniors. They're not going to have the access or understanding of technology maybe that other people have. So the state of Minnesota, legal aid across the state of Minnesota applied for some CARES Act funding after the court system went virtual. So, in 2020, courts went virtual, and they are staying virtual for the most part. And so access to the remedies in a court hearing required technology. You absolutely had to have technology to do that. And what we found was there's a digital divide. There's a digital divide based on income and based on age of who has access to what they need to do exactly what we're doing now. Court it's literally a Zoom hearing. And to be able to appear in person, being seen, is so much better than a telephone call. And to also be able to appear in person at a court hearing in a way that's safe, in a way that's confidential, depending on what your personal living space is like, all of those things are necessary. So we received some CARES Act funding through the governor, through the federal government. And the first part of the project is the Legal Kiosk Project. And that is a network of spaces, 160 of them across the state of Minnesota, about 48 of them in Northwest Minnesota, that allow the digital access points for people to either meet with their attorneys virtually, apply for legal aid, go to that Law Help website I just talked about, oftentimes with a printer and a scanner, and like a locked down computer that really makes that possible. Now, we know that technology still needs humans sometimes to help. So a lot of them are in public libraries, for example, like a small cubicle in a public or not cubicle, small office space in a public library. So your librarian can help somebody get onto a Zoom hearing. And they've really been an amazing asset for people attending court. So for example, about 2 weeks ago, we had a senior call our office at 8:30 on Monday morning in a total panic because she had court at 9:15 that morning. She had an eviction hearing 45 minutes later. Normally, I think what we have done is that ask for continuance. What can you do? What are we going to do? She didn't have access to technology. She didn't have a lawyer. She'd kind of been in some denial and was hoping it was just going away. And at 8:30 in the morning, she was 45 minutes away from losing her housing. We were able to direct her to a legal kiosk, have somebody, I said, bring your court paperwork, have somebody show her how to log on to Zoom. All you got to do is put the number in, click a button. And one of the main buttons, I should have done more of a presentation here on the kiosk, but you just click a button that says Zoom, write in your Zoom number, write in your passcode, and she was in the hearing. And she could see the judge, and one of our lawyers was able to then remotely attend that hearing too. We don't have lawyers in all 22 counties, but with the upside of Zoom courts is that we did have a lawyer in that hearing that was able to step in and represent her on that spot and save her housing. So the legal kiosk project I just wanted to highlight. We also have a justice bus. There are 4 across the state. This is a mobile legal aid clinic. So if you have, it's a fully equipped clinic. It can be used for outreach, but it's also has all the technology. So we can bring technology to people who don't have it. So if anyone has senior fair or healthcare fair or an event, we are happy to bring the justice bus to it to bring people that legal information, whether it be a legal clinic or whatever. That reachjustice.org website, I'd encourage you just to take a look at it. You can both request a justice bus. You can see where the legal kiosks are. There's an interactive map, put in your location, see where the nearest one is. And these are all very new projects, but we're really excited about them. And just continuing to find different ways to reach and to meet clients where they're at. All right. We're not going to take an hour, right, Joy?
We are not going to take an hour. All right. Community education is another thing that we can do to help elders. We can go out and we can educate the community on their rights and their responsibilities. We are willing to put on presentations via Zoom or in person. Just reach out and we can help. The other thing with stopping legal abuses and stop problems from arising, if you see something or hearing something going on that just doesn't seem right, but you're not sure if there's anything that legally we can do to assist, feel free to reach out. I'm open to providers running scenarios by me to see if there's something that we can do to help or see if we know of another organization that we can refer out to. And then when we're talking about trainings, we're open to providing trainings on advanced planning, simple wills, powers of attorney, advanced care directives, or even educating about what the current scams are involving elders and what to watch out for.
And we do those fairly regularly, but we're happy to do more. And the amazing thing about the Zoom, maybe not so much for community members, but we've been able to do it for caregivers. I know I worked with Julie's group for caregivers, even if it's 2 or 3 people. If I don't have to drive 3 hours to do it, I will show up at any meeting, right? Like, it's a great thing. And I think those powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and talking about scams, I don't think we can over talk about scams. If that makes sense. I don't know if you guys are seeing that. I've never talked to seniors and not have them have been not a victim so much, they don't know, but been targeted. And I mean, and that being said, I get those calls all the time. I either need to renew my car warranty or my student loans or my social security is being cut off. I'm getting them repeatedly and I don't have a landline, right? So we know that our seniors are getting those scams, and I get so mad about it. My mother-in-law, who we've talked to about scams for 10 years, is still saying, oh, I think I may have won Publishers Clearinghouse. I think I may have won a new car. They called me and said, they want me to choose what car it is. And she says, I know I probably didn't win, but there's a little part of her that hopes, right? Because don't we all, right? I mean, I don't fault her for that. But that scam issue, if there's any group of providers, that even providers who deal with seniors that would be open to a presentation, I don't always know what the latest scam is or the best scam, but I know there's more and more coming. So we talk about red flags. We talk about talking to your friends and neighbors. We talk about what you might see happening when somebody has been sucked in, especially some of those relationship-based scams where they truly don't believe this person is scamming them. They truly believe it's a friend. they truly believe it's somebody, a single mom in Georgia that they're helping.
And we have providers who have received funds for iPad projects who they've been able to give out to some seniors and to caregivers. And so that would be a great presentation to encourage those folks with the iPads, that if they could log on, and we could certainly work with Ann to set up a Zoom training for that type of thing. So if anyone's interested, please feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, we are happy to do that. And I know we went over the sorts of things we do pretty quickly. And I know that Joy already said it twice, but I'm going to say it again. If you just have this feeling like, I wonder if this is a case that we should talk to a civil legal aid lawyer. I wonder if the county can do that. I wonder if the neighborhood association can do that. We might not know right away, but we are happy to take those calls and do just what I would consider a technical assistance call, because the client might not be ready to do it. And if the answer is, oh gosh, there's absolutely nothing, they're out of luck, then we don't want to waste that person's time going through an application process and kind of, getting their hopes up. So I think I know that we will share this PowerPoint at the end, but we're happy to come to any event, and table or whatever. And we're also happy to do technical assistance visit. We just want to be as available. It is hard to serve 22 counties, but we're doing our best to do it, and virtually, in person, however we can do it. So I just want to reiterate that applying for services, we try and have as many options as possible. One thing I didn't say about those legal kiosks is there is a button right there to apply for legal aid. So if somebody does want to apply online at legal kiosks, but sometimes for seniors, the telephone is just the easiest way. And do a application over the telephone. We do have online applications. We have paper applications. We have a federal funder who does not love that, but I'm like, we need every option possible. Some people are more comfortable printing out a piece of paper and writing it down and mailing it in or scanning it in or having someone write to that. So, and in person, if somebody happens to live in one of our where our offices are, in Moorhead, Alexandria, or Bemidji, I put that option on there. We know that we serve, and I keep saying it, 22 counties, and that's not a super helpful option if you live in Lake of the Woods. But it is for some people that in person is needed. And we can apply if we have a community education event, someone wants to apply for services, legal kiosks, and our justice bus events. So,
And
yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong and tell me if this is right. So if a senior over the age of 60 calls you, they automatically are allowed to speak to an attorney, correct?
Yeah.
However, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to help them, correct?
No, unfortunately, what we want to do is be able to give everybody a little bit of advice and information. And so sometimes there's seniors that are just over, or we're looking at their legal issues. Are those really civil legal aid issues? We absolutely can step in if somebody's over issue. If somebody calls in, and honestly, if they say, we are trying to figure out how to do estate planning for our $5 million estate that includes a lake cabin, 2 lake cabins, 3 houses, and property in Vail, we're not the right people to call. But I will say in particular, we're going to go farther along in assistance for somebody who has a health benefit issue, and access to a care issue, things along that line. So I know that's not a perfect answer, Judy, but yes, we're going to try and get someone over 60 who's over income. We're going to try and get them to that advocate of the day to give some brief advice. But then the second step would be, what kind of legal issue is it and how much we can do? Unfortunately, even for extremely low income clients, I always say, good news is you're not in a domestic violence relationship. Good news is you don't have a custody issue. Good news is all these other things. Bad news is, as a result, we're not going to be able to represent you at this hearing.
Right.
But I'm just saying one more time, Joy's position is senior law and public benefits, like those access to those supports that seniors need to be safe and healthy in their homes or whatever living facility is for them. Those are really going to be prioritized for us.
Well, and I really think that too, it sometimes just asking, it's like, I don't even know where to start, even if I do have a property in Vail or wherever. I mean, I don't necessarily qualify for that, but it's like just having someone to say, yeah, you've got something to stand on, you probably should seek, this.
Yes.
So there's a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
One is it more of a first come, first served basis, or how do you choose who gets the help you offer?
I think that we have a priorities document and we prioritize it based on critical basic needs, right? So that's what we were talking about earlier. So in family law areas, we're going to look at safety and security of the individual and children. So sometimes that might be a grandchild, right? And I think Joy used that example. Those domestic violence, order of protection cases, and then critical basic needs. So housing is going to be really important. And then sort of healthcare and public benefits are going to be up there as well.
Okay.
So it's not going to be if you just called first, but you have an estate planning issue, for example, that's probably not going to, just because you called first isn't get you to the top of the list. It's going to be the type of case and how it impacts the client.
Okay. Yep, that
Does
makes
that
sense.
help? Joy, feel
Yep.
free to interrupt and jump in too.
The next one says a question on confidentiality. When several agencies are involved, hold on, I'm sorry, when you quit changing.
Oh, sorry, it moved
I know,
yours.
that's okay.
I can see it now though, so that's
Where did
helpful.
it go?
Yeah.
Such as law enforcement, human services, clients, church, and a provider office, can information be shared? This would involve a client that has been deemed to be vulnerable and has multiple contacts with each agency. An adult child who is out of state has asked that all parties come together to try to figure out the best solution for the elderly parent. Can and what information should be shared or can be?
Joy, feel free to jump in. I have my first thoughts. I
And
think.
if I didn't say that correctly.
No, I can see it now.
Okay, so if I didn't say that correctly, Peggy, please feel free to unmute and clarify.
I think there's two, it sort of depends on how we would step in, right? Like if we don't have a client, it's a different situation, right? Like that it would, and we do sit on some multidisciplinary teams for elder abuse. So we talk and we just do brainstorming and we have some agency-wide agreements, and that's when we're sort of brainstorming how do we help this vulnerable person. So we might be able to step in and say, here's some ideas and here's what legal barriers you may or may not have. If the elderly parent was our client, applied for services, and we have an attorney-client relationship, we would need releases from that client to talk to other agencies. Does that make sense, Peggy? I answered it depending on whether that elderly parent is a client or not, I think is the big tipping point.
And it does. And I think the issue that we're running into is, can we share information with law enforcement, with human services, with the individual's church without having a release from the individual? That's where we're kind of murky.
Oh, so could you share it? Not so much could we talk to you about it?
Right. The son has said, we know that this is going, or I think it's a brother. We know that this is going on, and we're really concerned about, her harming herself. So we have already been in contact with law enforcement, but he's saying, okay, all of you have a little piece, but not everybody has the whole story. Can we legally speak to these other agencies without a release from the elderly person?
I don't know if I can speak to what the other agencies might have for confidentiality. Joy, if feel free. I think that the adult children don't have any professional, right? They're doing it as a child, not as a law enforcement officer, not as social services.
Right.
I think each agency is going to have different rules on what they can share.
Okay.
I know that's a really vague, it depends. That's a classic lawyer answer. Sorry, Peggy, I don't know. I don't know, Joy, if you have any thoughts about that. Joy comes to us with a public defender background, so maybe has a different view on some of that stuff too.
I agree. I think it's going to be dependent on the agency, like what the releases state. But I kind of like the idea of the adult child kind of being the person that can go between all the agencies with no confidentiality. They can share whatever they want from one agency to the next, what they've been told.
Okay, that's kind of the way I was leaning to, but I just wanted a little bit of reassurance before I pull everybody together. Thank you. I know we kind of stepped out of it.
And I don't know. I know that there are, like I said, there's these multidisciplinary teams for elder abuse in some counties. Different counties have different sort of arrangements, and it tends to be when there is a situation like that, with an elderly person who they, and not so much like a self-neglect. This might be more of a self-neglect. They tend to come together with adult protection, law enforcement, the prosecutor, all of these when they're like, is something criminal happening here? This sounds a little bit more like a self-neglect
Yeah,
case. Okay.
and a lot of mental health issues. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's one more, is there a place that a person can do a will online?
You know, that's a really good question. We
I
can
know
look-
there's like, what is it, like Rocket Lawyer or something like that, but I think they all
yeah,
charge.
legal Zoom and things like
Yeah.
that. What I can look at though, because the only thing I would say about that is we can look at Law Help MN and see if they have one, is that there's, depending where you're doing it, and we're talking Minnesota, there's always like a specific requirement, right? Like you have to have a witness, or you have to have this, or you have to have it dated, and making sure that those legal requirements for Minnesota are met. That's the only thing but I think if you had some means, I think, is it Legal Zoom or those are pretty good. I don't want to vouch for any particular company or not. But
No,
it is,
I know I've even looked at those before for other stuff, and usually they ask what state you reside in.
yeah.
And so, yeah.
And I'm sure like my friends in the private bar don't love it when I say this, but I think like healthcare directives, powers of attorney, and a simple will. Now, assuming it's very simple, and that's where I get a little bit nervous. The first two for sure. I mean, I don't think you need a lawyer for those. That being said, we're happy to help people.
Mhm.
And have that conversation if somebody is vulnerable about, are you sure you want your daughter with a gambling problem to be your power of attorney, right? Like that's where I think, that's the thing I worry about on those. But the forms themselves are healthcare directors and power attorneys, they're really standard. Check a box on what powers. No, but again, understanding what you're doing is more critical than the form itself, I think, for both of those.
Okay.
What power are you giving up? What power are you sharing? When does this thing trigger? When does it terminate? Things like that.
Sure. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments that you'd like to unmute and ask or drop in the chat?
Just a shout out to Anne. Last fall, I believe it was, I invited Anne to my caregiver support group, my virtual support group, just to talk about scams and power of attorney and advanced directives. And yeah, she did a phenomenal job.
Oh, thanks, Julie.
Yes, you're welcome. So great addition to the support group.
They were great too. They're so fun. I really enjoyed it. So I'm happy to do that. They were delightful.
Good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anne and Joy, and I surely appreciate you guys taking the time. And there's always such good information and clarity, and I think you gave some good websites and stuff. And if you would just share your presentation with me, that'd be great. Then I'll share it out so that everybody can have the web addresses and all that stuff that you spoke about and the numbers and all that.
We'll do that.
All right.
And again, don't hesitate to contact. I think that I didn't share my last slide, but the slideshow will have my number on it. And I love taking calls and kind of having those conversations with people. So don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.